When I begged my husband for money to save our 3-year-old daughter's life, he looked at me with cold eyes and said, "I don't need a sick child dragging me down." Then he threw us onto the streets and moved his mistress into our home. I stood there in the rain, holding my feverish daughter, watching him slam the door in our faces. That moment changed everything. It sparked something inside me, a determination that would eventually bring his perfect world crumbling down. But let me start from the beginning. My name is Sarah, and just 6 months ago I thought I was living a fairy tale. At 28, I was married to Michael, had a beautiful daughter named Emma, and lived in a gorgeous house in Seattle. We weren't rich, but Michael's job as a real estate developer kept us comfortable. I was the proud, stay-at-home mom he wanted me to be. Looking back now, I should have seen the signs. The late-night calls he'd take in another room. The business trips got longer and more frequent. The way he stopped asking about Emma's day or kissing me goodbye in the mornings. But love makes you blind, doesn't it? I made excuses for everything. He's working hard for our future, I told myself. He's stressed about the new project. He's just tired. If I'd known then what I know now, I would have run far away. But that's not how my story went. Instead, I had to learn the hard way that the man I married wasn't who he pretended to be. I met Michael 5 years ago at a friend's wedding. He was the charming groomsman who kept making everyone laugh, and I was the bridesmaid who couldn't stop staring at his smile. When he asked me to dance, my heart skipped a beat. By the end of the night, I knew he was special. Our romance was like a whirlwind: fancy restaurants, surprise weekend trips, and sweet goodnight texts. He'd send flowers to my office just because it was Tuesday. My friends were jealous, and my parents adored him. 6 months later, when he proposed at sunset on a beach, I didn't hesitate to say yes. The wedding was everything I'd dreamed of. Michael insisted on paying for it all: the big venue, the expensive cake, the perfect dress. "Nothing but the best for my girl," he'd say, kissing my forehead. I felt like the luckiest woman alive. We bought our house a year later. It was bigger than what we needed, but Michael said it was an investment in our future family. I spent months decorating each room, imagining the children we'd have running through the halls. When I got pregnant with Emma, Michael was over the moon. He painted the nursery himself and built her crib on weekends. Emma's birth was the happiest day of our lives. Michael cried when he held her for the first time, promising to always protect his little princess. Those early days were magical. Watching him rock her to sleep, hearing him sing silly songs during diaper changes, and seeing them snuggle during morning cartoons. But things started changing when Emma turned 2. Michael's company was growing, and suddenly he was always busy. Dinner times got later and later. Sometimes he'd miss them entirely. The weekend daddy-daughter playtime became rare. "I'm doing this for us," he'd say whenever I brought it up. "We need to secure our future. And the final stages. We get to do this." I tried to be understanding. After all, his hard work meant I could stay home with Emma, taking her to playdates and gymnastics classes. We had a beautiful home, a nice car, and could afford organic everything. If he seemed distant sometimes, that was the price of success, right? Looking back, I can see how naive I was. The signs were there: the password on his phone that he never shared, the credit card statements he'd snatch before I could see them, the mysterious weekend business meetings that he couldn't explain. But I trusted him completely. I believed in our love story. End of story 2. Emma was my world. At 3, she was this bundle of energy and giggles, always curious about everything. Her brown curls bounced when she ran, and her green eyes, just like her daddy's, lit up at every discovery. She'd wait by the window every evening, hoping to catch a glimpse of Michael's car pulling into the driveway. "Where is Daddy coming home?" she'd ask, her little face pressed against the glass. "Soon, baby," I'd always say, even when I wasn't sure myself. "Daddy's working hard for us." I had no idea then that our perfect life was built on lies, or that everything was about to fall apart, most devastatingly. It started on a Tuesday morning. Emma woke up with a slight fever. Nothing too alarming at first. I gave her some children's Tylenol and kept her home from preschool. "Mommy's here, sweetie," I said, cuddling her on the couch while we watched her favorite cartoons. By evening, something wasn't right. Her fever hadn't broken, it was getting worse. Emma, usually so full of energy, just lay in my arms, her little body burning up. When she started having trouble focusing her eyes, real fear gripped my heart. "Emma," I heard a woman calling to me. "Emma, did you hear me?" I tried calling Michael. Once, twice, 5 times. Each time, straight to voicemail. "Michael, Emma's sick. Please call me back. I'm worried." I texted him too. "Emergency. Need you home. Now." He finally replied with a short message. "In meetings. Handle it." Emma's condition deteriorated rapidly overnight. Her temperature hit 104, and she started having small tremors. By dawn, she was barely responding to my voice. I'd never been so terrified in my life. I rushed her to the emergency room, my hands shaking as I filled out the paperwork. The waiting room was packed, but one look at Emma and the nurse rushed us through. Everything became a blur of doctors, tests, and medical terms I didn't understand. Dr. Martinez, a neurologist with kind eyes, finally gave me the news. "Your daughter has viral encephalitis, an inflammation of the brain. She needs immediate treatment and possible surgery to reduce the swelling. Without it," she paused, her expression grave, "without it, there could be permanent damage, or worse." The words hit me like a physical blow. "How much?" I whispered, already dreading the answer. Our insurance had lapsed, something about a missed payment that Michael was supposed to handle. "The initial treatment and surgery will be around $50,000, Dr. Martinez said gently. "We'll need a deposit of $15,000 to begin." $15,000. My legs went weak. I had maybe $500 in my account. Michael handled all our finances. I tried calling him again, this time leaving a tearful voicemail. "Michael, please. Emma needs surgery. It's serious. They need $15,000 right now. Please call me back, please." I watched the read receipt appear on my messages. He was seeing everything, but still no response. Hours passed. Emma's condition worsened. The nurses kept giving me concerned looks, asking if I'd secured the deposit yet. In desperation, I called Michael's office. "I'm sorry," his secretary said, sounding uncomfortable. "Mr. Anderson is in an important meeting and can't be disturbed. He said to tell you he'll call you back later." Later? Our daughter was fighting for her life, and he was in a meeting. Something inside me snapped. I knew then that I had to find another way. Emma couldn't wait for her father to decide we were worth his time. With Emma drifting in and out of consciousness in her hospital bed, I ran to my car. My hands trembled as I opened my jewelry box, the one thing of value I had. My wedding ring, the diamond earrings Michael gave me for our anniversary, my grandmother's gold necklace, everything I owned that might be worth something. The first jewelry store turned me down. The second one, too. At the third store, I broke down crying, telling the owner my story. Mr. Chen, an elderly man with gentle eyes, listened quietly. "Please," I begged. "My daughter, she needs surgery. I'll take whatever you can give me." He studied my jewelry carefully, then looked at my tear-stained face. $8,000, he said softly. "It's more than they're worth." But he hesitated, then wrote out the check. "Save your daughter." It wasn't enough. I was still 7,000 short. Running out of options, I called every friend I had, something Michael had always told me never to do. "We don't ask for help," he used to say. "We're better than that." Grace, my best friend from college, transferred $3,000 without hesitation. "I'm coming to the hospital," she said. "You shouldn't be alone." His face flashed with memories. My parents, living on a fixed retirement income, scraped together another $2,000. By evening, I was still $2,000 short, and the hospital needed the full amount to proceed. Since tears rained down my face, Mr. Chen called me back. "I've been thinking about your situation," he said. "Bring me the papers from the hospital. I'll cover the rest. You can pay me back when you can." I collapsed in tears, overwhelmed by the kindness of strangers and friends, while my husband, the man who had vowed to stand by me in sickness and health, ignored my calls. The surgery lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of pacing the hospital corridors, clutching my phone, still hoping Michael would call. Grace stayed with me, bringing coffee I couldn't drink and food I couldn't eat. Finally, Dr. Martinez emerged, looking tired but smiling. "The surgery was successful. We've reduced the swelling, and with proper care, Emma should make a full recovery." Relief flooded through me. My baby would live. She would be okay. In that moment, Nothing else mattered. It was midnight when my phone finally lit up with a message from Michael. "Had a busy day, everything okay?" I stared at those casual words, my hands shaking with anger now, not fear. Our daughter had almost died, and he was asking if everything was okay? I didn't reply. Instead, I sat by Emma's hospital bed, watching her chest rise and fall, listening to the steady beep of monitors. She looked so small, so fragile, with bandages around her head and tubes in her arms. "Mommy's here, baby," I whispered, holding her tiny hand. "I'll always be here." Same. I had no idea then that the worst was yet to come, or that my world was about to be shattered all over again. 3 days later, Emma was strong enough to go home. She still needed rest and medication, but she was alive and getting better. That's all I cared about. I carried her to my car, her head resting on my shoulder, her favorite teddy bear clutched in her small hands. It was early evening when we pulled into our driveway. Michael's black Mercedes was there, unusual for this time of day. Through the living room windows, I could see lights on and movement inside. My heart lifted slightly. Maybe he'd finally realized what he'd done. Maybe he was waiting to apologize. "Look, Emma," I whispered. "Daddy's home." I unlocked the front door, balancing Emma on my hip. The sound that hit me first was laughter. A woman's laughter. Not just any woman. As I stepped into the living room, I froze. There was Michael, lounging on our couch, the one we'd picked out together for our first home. Next to him sat a woman I'd never seen before. Young, blonde, wearing a dress that probably cost more than all the money I'd just scraped together for Emma's surgery. They were sharing wine. My favorite wine glasses. "Michael?" My voice cracked. He looked up, completely unfazed. No guilt, no shame, not even surprise. Just annoyance. "Ouch." "Oh," he said flatly. "You're back." The woman smiled, a predatory smile that made my skin crawl. "You must be Sarah," she purred. "I'm Victoria. Michael's told me so much about you." Emma stirred in my arms, whimpering softly at the tension in the room. Michael glanced at her bandaged head with complete indifference. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Our daughter nearly died, Michael. Where were you?" "I am here." He stood up, straightening his expensive suit. "Sarah, let's be adults about this. Victoria and I have been together for months. I've been trying to find the right time to tell you." "Months?" The word felt like acid in my mouth. "While I was home taking care of our daughter? While she was in surgery?" "About that," he said coldly. "I've had my lawyer draw up some papers. This house is in my name. I need you and Emma out by tomorrow." The room started spinning. "You're throwing us out? Your daughter?" Victoria stood up, smoothing her dress. "Michael needs to focus on his future now. A sick child would just hold him back." She wrapped her arm around his waist. "We have plans." I looked at the man I'd loved, the father of my child, and saw a stranger. "You're a monster," I whispered. "No," he replied calmly. "I'm just done pretending. Your things are packed in boxes in the garage. Take them and go." Emma began to cry softly, and I held her closer. "You'll regret this," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I promise you that." With nowhere else to go, I called Grace. It was almost midnight, but she answered on the first ring. When I told her what happened, she didn't hesitate. "Come to the shelter," she said firmly. Grace worked as a counselor at New Beginnings Women's Shelter. "I'll have a room ready for you and Emma." The shelter was in a converted Victorian house, its windows glowing warmly in the dark. Grace was waiting on the porch, her dark hair pulled back, wearing the same clothes from the hospital. She hadn't even gone home. "Oh, honey," she whispered, hugging me carefully around Emma. "I'm so sorry." The room was small but clean, with 2 beds and a tiny bathroom. Grace helped me settle Emma, who had fallen asleep exhausted. Then she sat me down and made me tell her everything. "Sarah," she said after I finished, her face serious. "Something's not right here. Michael's always been a jerk, but this is different. The timing, the new woman, the sudden cruelty, it doesn't add up." I wiped my eyes. "What do you mean?" "I have a friend," she said slowly. "His name's David. He's a private investigator who specializes in cases like yours. Let me call him." David arrived the next morning. He was older than I expected, maybe 50. with kind eyes and a notebook he kept in his jacket pocket. He listened without interrupting as I told my story again. "Mrs. Anderson," he said when I finished, "your husband's behavior follows a pattern I've seen before. Men don't usually abandon their families this dramatically, unless they're hiding something bigger." "Hiding what?" "That's what we're going to find out." He opened his notebook. "I'll need some information. His work schedule, bank accounts, any passwords you might know." While David started his investigation, Grace helped me focus on practical matters. She connected me with a lawyer who specialized in family law. Lisa Martinez was a fierce woman in her 40s who took one look at my situation and agreed to take the case. "First things first," Lisa said during our meeting. "We're filing for emergency custody of Emma and freezing any joint accounts you have with Michael." Emma was getting stronger each day, the bandages replaced with just a small Band-Aid. She asked about her daddy sometimes, and each time it broke my heart. "Daddy's busy," I would say, hating the lie, but not knowing how else to explain it to a 3-year-old. A week after we moved into the shelter, David called. "Mrs. Anderson, I need to see you immediately. I found something." His face was grim when he arrived. He placed a thick folder on the table between us. "Your husband isn't just having an affair," he said quietly. "He's been running a massive fraud scheme. And Victoria, she's not just his mistress. She's his partner in crime." Grace grabbed my hand as David opened the folder. "Sarah," he said, "what I'm about to show you will change everything." David spread out documents across the table. Bank statements, property records, and photographs. My hands trembled as I looked at them. "Your husband has been running a real estate scam," David explained. "He's been taking investment money for properties that don't exist, then funneling it through offshore accounts." The numbers made my head spin. Millions of dollars were stolen from innocent people. Photos showed Michael and Victoria at expensive restaurants and luxury resorts, all while I was selling my jewelry to save our daughter. "That's not all," David continued, pulling out more papers. "Remember how your insurance lapsed before Emma's surgery? He canceled it deliberately. He's been moving money out of all your joint accounts for months." Grace cursed under her breath. "He planned this. He was setting you up to be desperate." "But why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why make his daughter suffer?" "Because he needed you broken and gone," Lisa said, joining us at the table. "If you'd had access to money, you might have noticed his schemes. A desperate mother fighting for her sick child. He thought you'd just disappear." David nodded. "Victoria's not just his girlfriend. She's a former bank employee who knows how to hide money. They've been working together for at least a year." My mind flashed back to all those late-night phone calls, the mysterious business trips, the passwords I wasn't allowed to know. It all made horrible sense now. "Here's the good news," Lisa said, her eyes gleaming. "They got sloppy. Confident. We have enough evidence here to not only take him down legally, but to get back everything he stole from you and Emma." "The FBI is already interested," David added. "They've been watching similar schemes in the area. Your evidence could be the key to breaking the whole case open." I looked at the photos again. Michael and Victoria laughing at expensive restaurants, lounging on beaches, all while my daughter lay in a hospital bed. Something hard and determined settled in my chest. "What do we need to do?" Lisa leaned forward. "We're going to hit him from all sides. Criminal charges for the fraud, civil suits for what he did to you and Emma, emergency custody orders, asset freezes. When we're done, he won't know what hit him." "It won't be easy," David warned. "Men like Michael, they fight dirty when cornered." Grace squeezed my hand. "You're not alone anymore, Sarah. We're all here." Emma's laugh echoed from the next room, where she was playing with one of the shelter's volunteers. The sound strengthened my resolve. "He threw us away like we were nothing," I said quietly. "He left our daughter to die because we were inconvenient to his plans. I want him to pay for that." Alyssa smiled grimly. "Oh, he will. We'll need to move fast, though. Are you ready?" I thought of Emma's tiny body in that hospital bed, of Michael's cold eyes as he threw us out. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." The courthouse loomed over us on that Monday morning. Emma held my hand, wearing her favorite blue dress, while Grace walked beside us. Inside, Michael and Victoria sat with their expensive lawyers, looking confident. He didn't even glance our way. "Remember," Lisa whispered, "tell the truth exactly as it happened. Let them see the real Michael Anderson. The judge was a stern-looking woman in her 60s. The courtroom fell silent as the proceedings began. As Michael's lawyer went first, painting me as a hysterical wife who couldn't handle his success. But Lisa was ready. One by one, she brought up our witnesses. Dr. Martinez testified about Emma's condition and my desperate search for money. Mr. Chen, the jewelry store owner, described my tears as I sold my wedding ring. Then came the financial experts. Mr. Anderson didn't just abandon his family, the forensic accountant explained. He systematically drained their accounts over months, leaving them deliberately vulnerable. Michael shifted uncomfortably as document after document was presented. Bank transfers, fake property deeds, offshore accounts. His perfect facade started cracking. The turning point came when Victoria took the stand. Under Lisa's questioning, she began to crumble. Yes, she finally admitted, her voice shaking. We planned it together. The insurance, the accounts, everything. We needed his wife out of the way. Michael jumped up, face red. You promised you wouldn't. Order! The judge's gavel crashed down. When it was my turn to testify, I looked straight at Michael. My daughter was dying, I said clearly. I begged you for help. You saw my messages. You knew she needed surgery. Instead, you were with her. I pointed at Victoria. At a resort in Miami. Lisa showed the credit card statements. The room buzzed with whispers. While I sold everything I owned to save our daughter's life, you were spending thousands on champagne and hotel suites. The judge's face hardened with each piece of evidence. When all testimony was done, she didn't even leave to deliberate. In all my years on the bench, she began, I have rarely seen such calculated cruelty. Mr. Anderson, you deliberately endangered your own child's life for financial gain. That alone is unconscionable. She turned to the FBI agents waiting in the courtroom. I'm releasing all evidence to federal authorities for criminal prosecution. As for the civil matters, Mr. Anderson, I'm awarding your wife full custody of your daughter, the house, and all assets not already seized by the federal government. Michael stood up, sputtering. You can't. I can and I am, the judge cut him off. Officers, take them into custody. I watched as Michael and Victoria were led away in handcuffs. He finally looked at me then, his face a mask of rage and disbelief. Emma tugged at my hand. Mommy, are we going home now? Huh? I picked her up, holding her close. Yes, baby. We're going home. 1 year later, our lives look completely different. The big house that once felt like a prison is now filled with Emma's laughter again. Her recovery was complete. The doctors say she won't even have a scar. And the rest of the story is mind-blowing. Michael and Victoria were sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. The money they stole was traced and returned to their victims. Sometimes Emma asks about her daddy, and each time it gets a little easier to explain that sometimes grown-ups make bad choices, but it doesn't mean she's any less loved. Grace visits often. She's become like a second mother to Emma. David and Lisa stop by too, now more friends than professionals. The shelter where we stayed? I volunteer there twice a week, helping other women find their strength. Last week, Emma had her 4th birthday party. As I watched her blow out her candles, surrounded by friends and people who truly love her, I realized something important. Sometimes what feels like the end is just a beginning. Mr. Chen was there too. He refused to let me pay him back for his kindness. Just promise to help someone else when they need it, he said. That's a promise I intend to keep. As I waited for my train to the station, I looked both ways before entering and came to what I hoped was a secure entrance. Yesterday, Emma and I planted a garden in our backyard. Look, Mommy, she shouted, pointing at a tiny sprout pushing through the soil. It's growing. Big Mom. Yes, it is, my sweet girl, just like us. We're not victims of Michael's betrayal anymore. We're survivors. And more than that, we're thrivers. Our story isn't about revenge anymore. It's about hope, healing, and the amazing strength you find when you stand up for what's right. The end.